Hello, students. Welcome to the next session of our literature. Today, we'll be discussing another short story which is there in your syllabus. That is Hearts and Hands, written by O. Henry. So, let's begin with the story. But before beginning with the explanation, I would like to discuss few points related to it. General points. Firstly, Hearts and Hands is a story of a mistaken identity involving Miss Fairchild, Mr. Easton, and the Marshal. We'll see that the Marshal is often described with the word glum-faced man. So the Marshal who is escorting Easton on a train to Leavenworth for the crime of counterfeiting. Secondly, if you look at the title, Hearts and Hands, it's quite rhythmic in nature. Apart from this, it has a very significant value also in the story. The title is very much apt and it could be explained from different perspectives of the readers. Like firstly, though the hands of the two men were handcuffed, representing contrasting relation between them, that is of a prisoner and an officer, but the hearts went alike. The Marshal, that is the glum-faced man, came forward to save his prisoner, that is Mr. Easton, from the embarrassing situation by lying to the woman. But a story also holds a climax or a surprise ending. And what is that? We'll come to know by the end of the story. So let's begin with the very first stanza. The first stanza, we have been provided with a scene of a coach, of a train, where many passengers or a rush of passengers could be seen. And over there, one pretty young woman who was dressed beautifully, elegantly, was sitting in that coach, or in one of the coaches of the train. Many new passengers were boarding the train, and among those new passengers, there were two young men. One of those is quite handsome with a bold and frank face, whereas the other one is a glum-faced man, right, who has a heavily built structure, and two of them were handcuffed together. Moving further to the next para. So what happened? These two young men, they came into the coach and they took a seat next to the young woman, right? They sat next to the young woman. Then suddenly young woman, she saw them, right? She had her glass means she just had a look at them, right? And when she looked at them, she had a lovely smile on her face. Her cheeks turned pink. She was blushing. She was happy to see those two men over there. And the reason is that among those two, the one who was handsome, that is Mr. Easton, was known to him, right? So she approached him and tried to have word with him. So she started her conversation with Mr. Easton, that is the first man or the handsome man, right? And she questioned him that don't he recognize his old friends, right? So on this, the younger man or the Mr. Easton, he just felt slightly embarrassed and quickly put his left hand forward for a handshake, right? And told Miss Fairchild to excuse him as his another hand, that is the right one, is busy at present. Why it's busy? Because he was handcuffed to the glum-faced man, that is Marshal, right? This is what I'm telling you, but it's not written over here whether that glum-faced man is the marshal or Mr. Easton is the prisoner. This is what I am revealing you over here, right? So he told that his hand is bound with this shining bracelet, that is the handcuff, right? So suddenly what happened, that happy look in the eyes of the girl slowly changed into a bewildered look. She was shocked. The glow which she had earlier on her cheeks, the happiness, it went away, right? But the glum-faced man, he quickly jumped into the conversation to save Mr. Easton from the embarrassment. This is what I told you in the very beginning, right? In this way, both of their hearts are alike. So, what happened? The glum-faced man, what he did? He spoke in between and he told that he told that, excuse me for speaking, miss. You see, I see you are acquainted with the marshal here, as you are busy with the marshal here. So I want you to excuse me, right? And what he wants to tell that Mr. Easton, means Mr. Easton is taking glum-faced man to the Leavenworth prison, right? So in this way, he saved Mr. Easton from the embarrassment in front of his friend. On this, girl took a sigh of relief, right? And again, she is happy now. And she is happy that her friend is a marshal. So next, Mr. Easton calmly told her that he has taken up the job for the sake of money, right? But once again, the girl's eyes were attracted by the shining handcuffs, right? Those silver bracelets, silver colored bracelets. On looking at this, once again, the glum-faced man said that, don't worry, miss, because all marshals, they handcuff themselves to the prisoners just to keep them away, getting away, from going away, from running away, right? And Mr. Easton knows his job very well as a marshal. So this is the reason that he has handcuffed, right? Okay, next. Now, on seeing that their conversation is going too long, glum-faced man once again intervened over here, right? And what he said to Mr. Easton, he called him marshal, told him that he need a drink and he has an urge to smoke because he hasn't done it for the whole day, right? So he's starving for that and he wants his pipe or his cigarette, right? So he just want to escape from that situation. This is the reason that he told Mr. Easton this thing, right? So on this, Mr. Easton, he slowly told Miss Fairchild that he cannot deny a request of a prisoner and he has to take him for that, for smoking, right? He cannot deny the petition for tobacco from his prisoner, right? So duty calls. So here it is the time for his duty and he has to bid goodbye to Miss Fairchild over here, right? So quietly, both of them, what they did, they just moved from there into the smoker's room, right? And that was just an excuse to get away from there. Now, there were two more passengers, or there were many other passengers, but among those, there were two passengers who were quietly observing the whole situation or listening to the whole conversation. And they were sitting near to three of them, right? Out of those two passengers, one of them said that the marshal is a good sort of a chap. Chap means man, right? And pretty young, quite young, to hold an office like that. Quite young to take up the job of a marshal, asked the other. So the other passenger out of these two, the other one questioned that, don't you think so that he is quite young to take up this job? Young? Exclaimed the first speaker. Why? Didn't you catch on? Means, didn't you get? How could you say this thing that he is too young, right? He was surprised by the point of the other one. Why you were saying this thing, right? Didn't you notice something? And what was that? Did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand? Have you ever seen? So he questioned that, have you ever seen any officer handcuffing a prisoner to the right hand, right? So in this way, the story ends here with a question in front of us raised by one of the two passengers, right? So at the very end of the story, what we come to know that actually the glum-faced man is the officer and Mr. Easton is the prisoner. So this is a twist by the end of the story, right? It's a surprise ending, and it is revealed to us through these two passengers. And a question often comes from this part of the story, that is from the last part of the story. So you are supposed to remember these textual words and the lines, right? If you look at the main themes of the story, so that has been compassion of a marshal for his convict, and the deceptive quality of appearance, as we saw in the very beginning or the very first para. See here, the first paragraph. This glum-faced man is the marshal, whereas the one who has a very handsome presence was the prisoner, right? So what we saw, that though Mr. Easton is a criminal, still the marshal or the officer rescues him from the embarrassment twice in the story. First of all, by telling a lie that he is a convict and Easton is the marshal, right? And then by the end, he helped him to escape the situation. So this has been an outstanding display of human compassion from the marshal, right? So the story reminds us one of the old lessons, that appearances can be deceptive. Also, until the last line of the story, if you go to the last line of the story, who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that Mr. Easton, just wait a minute. So look at this last line if you go over here. So who would have thought that Mr. Easton is not the marshal but the criminal? So this twist in the end not only makes the story interesting and likable for the readers, but also delivers the message that things should not always be taken at the face value. Okay? And if we look at the title of the story, that is Hearts and Hands, it draws a lot of attention, right? One, it has a rhythmic quality. Hearts and Hands has a rhythmic quality. And as I told you in the very beginning, it could be explained from different perspectives, right? As both of them were handcuffed Their relationship is contrasting. One is a prisoner, another is the officer, but the hearts went alike, right? The marshal could feel the beats of the heart of his convict. He came forward to save his prisoner from the embarrassing situation by lying to Miss Fairchild. Although his duty or his hands were forced to do the duty of punishing a convict, but his heart made him feel pity for Mr. Easton. So here your story ends. Read the story thoroughly, went through each and every textual words, go through the word meanings given in the workbook, read the other important points which are given prior to the question answers in your workbook, and try to solve your questions. I hope it's going to be helpful for you people. Thank you.